Hi, everyone. Quite a privilege to be here in Singapore at this festival and with a most wonderful panel to chat with. I think the AI tsunami has changed, transformed everything, the way we live, work, and play at a pace that we've not seen before. And I think the whole day we've been talking about how this is going to impact people. The size of the opportunity is huge. PwC says that over the next 10 years, $15 trillion is what the Gen AI opportunity will give us. Goldman Sachs says $7 trillion and a percentage and a half increase in productivity. Accenture had a report that said productivity of companies that drive AI-driven processes will be 2.4 times as what it is right now. So clearly, we can quibble about the numbers, we can quibble about the sources, but I think the scale is well established. But the catch is, do we have the right people? Do we have the people who are skilled enough to take advantage of this opportunity? Whether it's the EU, whether it's ASEAN, even India, there is a shortage of talent to fulfill these new job roles. And this shortage is only going to increase over time. India has a whopping 400,000 people skilled in AI, and even that is 50% short of the demand. So we have a huge opportunity in India. India graduates 2 million people a year in STEM. But the bad news is that only 45% of them are employable. But then there's a good news too, because that gives us a lot of headroom to fulfill the talent gap, not just for India domestically, but also for the world, because as we know, the world is also going through an ageification, if I may call it that, and India is going to be the one country that has the talent with the right skill set, as well as a population that's young and will be 65%, I think, will be in the working age group by 2030. But there are concerns, and the concerns are, where are the jobs? Will AI take them away? Are our people prepared? Will our people be replaced by automation? The optimistic view, and I hold the optimistic view, is what history tells us, that whenever there's been a transformation in technology, think automobiles, think internet, think electricity, while the old jobs went away, there were a plethora of new jobs that came up. Will that happen in India? The difference between then and now is really the speed of the transformation. So I have two people from the government on my panel, because that means it needs governments, CEOs, policymakers, change makers to act and act fast. India's been doing a fair bit in mission mode. I can talk about the AI mission, the Skill India mission, the semiconductor mission, and whatnot. Is it working? Are there some things that we need to do better? What's the playbook, and what are the critical elements that we need to follow? And I have two wonderful people to talk about it with very different but very complementary perspectives. I have Dr. Saurabh Garg, who is the Secretary at the Ministry of Skills and Program Implementation. He probably has the largest public data set in the country, and that we've heard enough and more. Data is the new oil, and I think it's a gold mine because of what he's driving. I have Dr. Rajan, who is the Industry Minister in the state of Tamil Nadu, which is really, if I may use the word, rocking it in terms of what we need to do on the talent side, because they know that if we have the people, the investment will follow. So welcome, Dr. Garg, and welcome, Dr. Rajan. The first question to you, Dr. Garg. India has a massive ambition to become a developed economy by 2047, which means that we need to grow from the current 6 to 7% to about 9 to 10%. How are we going to do it? Are we prepared? And especially looking at the people problem, because I do think the people gap is going to probably slow us down if we don't do something about it. What's India doing?
Thank you. And just to clarify at the beginning, I'm at the Ministry of Statistics not the Ministry of Skills.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's perfectly fine.
I'm so sorry. I'm so used to saying Ministry of Skills. It just came out. Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation.
Sure. So just to say that if you look at 2047 is what we're talking of a Viksit Bharat, by which we hope to be a developed nation. If we just look at the past 10 years, the kind of growth that we've had a consumption expenditure of the lowest levels, both in rural and urban, which has doubled. We are the fastest growing economy as of now, and we will continue, I'm sure, in the near future also the way we've been doing. And as you mentioned, we have a young population which is 65% less than the age of 35, which will really drive many of these initiatives. Also, there's a clear vision which has been laid out that what is it that we need to do in the next 25 years, which is broken down into 5-yearly intervals, that what is it at the granular level that we need to do in the next 5 years and so on. And just to give some examples, for example, in this year's budget alone, around 1.5 lakh crores, which is nearly 17 billion US dollars, has been allocated for education, skills and employment. We have various interventions like, and which are again at the granular level, a PM internship, which hopes to give 10 million youth experience in the top companies in the next 5 years. And then we have the implementation of the new education policy, which will also focus on many of these issues. So I think there is a playbook, and that playbook is being operated across ministries in the government of India and by the state governments, keeping in view the broad vision of the next 25 years.
So that gives me a perfect segue to ask Dr. Rajan, how is it really playing out on the ground?
I think in a place like Tamil Nadu, we have a bit of a different perspective, because we're about 6% of the population. We're about 18 to 20% of either the STEM graduates or the institutions that produce the STEM graduates. There are many of our, Tamil alumni here. So for us, there's a twofold problem. The first is for those nearing the age of employment, let's say high school, college, etc., how do we adapt them to the rapidly changing kind of efficient frontier of where the skills are going to be needed in industry that is going through an inflection perspective right now, or a point. And that we have, since our government has come to power, we have focused a lot on creating new programs, career counseling, mentorship, bringing expatriates and world leaders in their fields to come and show how it was done or project what is going to be needed in the future, also to improve our statistics of what the economic growth is going to look like, in which sector, to what demand, etc., and in particular in the technology sector because of our disproportionate representation. But there's a second issue which I think we have to start at the level of education at its foundation. We have done relatively well in terms of elementary education, even through secondary education, and in our case, the priority has always been 100% inclusion. It's weighted average productivity of your workforce is what's going to determine how competitive you are in a global economy, and therefore what rate of growth you're going to have as the world is short both human capital and opportunities to invest financial capital. So if we want to compete in that level, we got to really be with foresight, not just for today, but for the next generation. Where, as you said, for the next generation, India is going to be the largest source of human capital. That's where the population is, that's where the infrastructure to get them to workforce level is. So there I think we need to really rethink how we do elementary education upwards. To be fair, a lot of our education so far has been focused more on rote learning and mastery of existing concepts rather than creative thinking or the kind of logic or argument type analysis that is needed to really succeed in AI, right? Like if you look now, one of the most used languages for programming is English, because prompt engineering has become such a big field and is going to become domain specific such a big field. So in some sense, we need to rethink the entire education model, which in India has been historically very good at mastering existing concepts and rote learning them. And we need to think much more about reasoning, logic, and sensitivity analysis and things like that. So that, I think, is a greater challenge. I think we have started to do some of that work. But again, in Tamil Nadu, we have the luxury because we have almost everybody in the system. It's more about adjusting. In other parts of India, we really need to start focusing at the bottom. And I think that'll be the game changer of 6%, 7% to 10%. The only thing I would say, I think we have some lead time, right? Much as the promise of AI is there and much as I believe it will do the kinds of transformative things that you've said, it'll take 10 years or it'll take a generation. Because to really get that kind of data in all languages, about all aspects, plus the kind of computing power that's needed, plus the energy that's needed, the capital investment that is needed to do that. So this transformation is not going to be overnight. The leading edge is here. For this to become the weighted average across the system is probably a decade. So if we start focusing on it now, we have the lead time to build up to it. At least that's my view. Yeah.
So just putting a different spin on it, while you say the lead time is 10 years, I think the data says that the lead time is probably shorter. When the EU says 7.8 million people, they'll be short of 7.8 million people by the year 2030, which is just about 6 years away. Some things need to be done now. So in terms, Dr. Garg, in terms of the school education that Dr. Rajan talked about, even college education, how are we going to play catch up? Even if we assume that 10 years is the lead time we have, change needs to start today. Is it?
I think on the education, and I would also come back to that point of the national education policy, which has focused on mainstreaming vocational education, which is essential for skilling. And some of the changes, I'll just mention 3 or 4, I can't mention all of them. For example, exposure to skill education is now being introduced at the upper primary level itself, rather than at a much lower level. Second, apprenticeship-based or embedded degree programs that have been conceptualized and are now will be under implementation. You also have Prime Minister's Kaushal Vikas Yojana, where we have already trained 14 million people in various skilling programs which have already been done. And at the university and the college level, the professors of practice that has been introduced, which was not there. All these, and the fact that, I'm just giving one example, 1,000 industrial training institutes, which are the ones who do vocational training, they will be modernized in the next 5 years. So I think at the granular level, the focus is to ensure that a lot more skilling initiatives are available. And a lot of these will ultimately be done through the digital medium and the investments in the digital public infrastructure, which are available. For example, we have these 3 portals, Diksha, Swayam and Swayam Prabha, which will ensure that equal opportunities, which Dr. Rajan was mentioning, to ensure that people who don't have access to good quality infrastructure, they will have the same kind of learning material and the learning experience through virtual labs also. So these portals will ensure that people who are in remote areas, other areas would have that kind of an access. And that is what is going to be used to telescope the times that we are talking of. And we have the Skill India portal, where anyone can register and focus on. And for example, another intervention, if I can give, for the past 3 or 4 years, we've been running a Smart India Hackathon, which is focused on undergraduate students to try and ask them to think of new problems and solutions to problems. So I'm just giving these examples just to highlight that the activities are across sectors, and across ages, so that the challenges which are there, we are able to face them in a more effectively.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that, and given that you are from the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, the key is, what's the impact of all this? We have the the Skill India mission, we have all the ITIs, but again, the employability, the quality of the certifications, the employability ratio of the people exiting the system has traditionally not been very good. What does the data say on the impact of these programs?
So let me just give a couple of facts. We do a lot of surveys regularly. We have the annual survey of industries, we do of the annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises, etc. And we are looking at how various technologies are getting used by unincorporated enterprises, which are really in the rural areas, single person owned enterprises. For example, smartphone ownership is now more than 90%, which ensures that across India, people have access to it. I won't say ownership is there, but access to it. That means at least one person in the household would be having a smartphone. And that is what is leading to the kind of changes. For example, in the agriculture sector, we have the e-Kisan, where you are able to send messages to farmers who can then ensure that preemptive measures are taken for disaster prevention. So, which will help ensure incomes to rural areas. We have, for example, in terms of productivity, to improve the Jan Shiksha Sansthan, which is again to impart skills in the rural areas also to improve productivity. So a lot of the measures that we are taking using digital means to ensure that access to information is there. And access to information means for agriculture it can mean one thing, for marketing it can mean one thing, for being able to sell products can be that. And given the fact that nearly still around 50% of our people are in agriculture, ensuring that availability of information and awareness of how to skill themselves. These are the two things which are showing up in the incomes and, as I mentioned, the increase in the household incomes and the fact that nearly more than 50% of the manufacturing enterprises in the unincorporated sector are owned by women. So, which is very important because a lot of issues around ensuring that there is no gender disparity in availability of information and access will get solved through the digital means.
So thanks, it's good to hear that women are not being left behind. There's a focus on the rural sector, there's a focus across sectors. But I'm going to flip it a bit to you, Dr. Rajan, to say eventually it's about jobs. And people who are getting skilled, are they getting employed? What's the approach that you have taken or your state has taken on making sure that while people get skilled, there are jobs too? Are there some best practices, that lessons that other states or countries could adopt?
Well, first let me clarify this notion. I didn't say that we have a 10-year lead time to be the human resource capital of the world. We have a 10-year lead time, in my view, before AI so changes the nature of work that there will not be today's jobs and there will only be some different jobs. So I think for the, starting now, but for the lead time, AI will be more augmentative than replacement. At some point, it's going to become replacement. I just think that lead time is up to a decade just because of the investment required. Today, right, we were just having this conversation that there are 3,000 plus IIM alumni in Singapore. Today, in every part of the world where I travel, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, Australia, Singapore, wherever you go, it is the Indian human capital that is powering a lot of entities, not just at the kind of middle or lower levels, but at the CEO, chairman level. So that era is already upon us. Yeah. Now, in terms of employment, so skilling is one half of it. The other is, let me just give you a comparison, right? If you look across different states, There are states like Kerala that have phenomenally good human capital investment, health, education, but they don't really have the capacity to create jobs. There are places where there are a lot of industries like Gujarat, but they don't really have the investment in human capital. So what Tamil Nadu, I think, has done right is that we have got the right mix of both human capital development, but also attractive enough an environment for investment that we are able to bring in the kind of global capital and the global corporates, which then lead to second tier, third tier OEM suppliers and so forth. If you look at the last few years, for example, Tamil Nadu went from number 4 to number 1 in electronics export. A lot of that is iPhone production moving from China to India, specifically to Tamil Nadu. If you look in another way, a lot of the sneaker industry has left and has come to India. And now we have a lot of tens of thousands of people. In fact, there was a statistic from the government of India that at this point, 42% of all women working in the formal manufacturing sector, 42% are working in Tamil Nadu, right? In a state that has less than 6% of the population. So that means you're doing three things right. One, you are making sure women are fully included in the education system and in their rights and in their access. Second, that you are skilling them to the right level that they can work these jobs. Third, that you have a business-friendly enough environment that a lot of investment is coming and a lot of new workplaces are created to get these jobs. Of course, you can do all of these better. I still think there's a lot of headroom. I think we are at that sweet spot where the capital, human capital, nowhere else in the world does it exist at this scale. The de-risking away from China, which was by far the trade, macro trade of the world for 20 years. Everybody's manufacturing went to China, and 100% of the excess profits went into foreign exchange reserves that were buying up the debt of the US and the UK and Europe and India and everybody else. So I think that trade has started to unwind in an aggressive way. And so between the human capital and the need for a location of the scale of China without the risk of China, I think this is the ideal time for us. And in that sense, that's why I said we need to focus on the high end as well. Transformation of the last mile is also important because opportunity is upon us today. But to prepare for the 10-year opportunity, we need to start preparing at the ground today to change the way people are taught, to change the way teachers teach from that level onwards. That's what I mean.
I love that, and I think the way teachers teach is going to be the key. Just prior to this session, there was a report that Accenture has launched on the Singapore talent trends, and the basic message was that the behavioral and softer skills and the creative and critical thinking skills are taking over from the hard technical skills, and that's where how teachers teach becomes so crucial. We have a question from the audience that says, what are the learning, and talking about teachers, say, what are the learnings and opportunities from India's capacity development plans for the audience and for young people in Singapore and elsewhere? So taking from your experience in Tamil Nadu, what would you advise people in Singapore?
Well, I think we had a bit of a unique problem, right, in the sense that our educational infrastructure scaled up exponentially in the space of 2 generations. So when I went to engineering school, the state of Tamil Nadu produced about 4,000 engineers a year. Now it produces some 160,000. So what has happened is there are a lot of first generation graduates whose parents or relatives cannot mentor them, cannot guide them, and they connect to the economy. They're pioneers in their own communities, in their own families. And so what has helped a lot is to give them that mentorship, that connectivity, that exposure, the career guidance, starting at high school, as I say, to let them know these are where the jobs are at. This is what it pays you. Sometimes it pays you better to be in a service sector, in, let's say, the hospitality industry in a 5-star hotel, than it does to be, working in a factory or getting an engineering degree but actually doing sales. This kind of information, this guidance has proven vital. We have put about 3 million students through this in the last 3.5 years, which is not just the current batches, but those who have graduated and couldn't get jobs. And this has helped greatly increase the efficiency of guiding people, because otherwise we had a problem. We had a very serious information inefficiency problem. Because on the one hand, you had a lot of graduates who couldn't get jobs. And on the other hand, you had a lot of companies who couldn't find people with the right skill. There's parallel problems. So it is clearly somewhere the information loop was broken. What should I study? What skills should I have if I want to have a good career? And what will my progression be like? These kinds of things just were not planned well enough because we scaled like, 4x in 30 years or something, or 40x in 30 years. So that, I think, has been our learning, is that you need the information of today and what the future is likely to look in the next 5 to 10 years, that you need to universalize it, not just to the students, but to their parents. Because most of the parents don't know what the market is like either, right? They're working much lower level jobs than where we want the children to be.
And we see this when we see that in colleges, kids who are doing engineering, 80% are doing computer science degrees, but the jobs are not in computer science. And as AI does most of the computing, the core domain, the mechanical, the electrical, the chemical is all getting left behind. But that also means that as we go through this digitalization of all sectors, the jobs are not necessarily going to be in IT. In fact, the other thing that the report showed, that some of the tech jobs were actually reducing, and the jobs will come up in other sectors. So Dr. Garg, do we need to approach skill building in a different way as we look at manufacturing? You talked about agriculture, but what about other sectors? How are we going to prepare for this digitalization of all sectors? I read recently that an automobile now has more lines of code than an Airbus. So what do we do?
Yeah. So one fact which I just want to put out there is the fact that our surveys that we do on, for example, labor force survey, it shows that, and I'm talking about women and it goes for men also, that rather than a degree in education, the probability that women would be working is higher if she has a skilling degree, a vocational degree. And this is across sectors. So I just wanted to mention this. But whether it's manufacturing or whether it's going to be service, one thing is common, that digital literacy or digital awareness, familiarization with the digital environment is going to be essential. And as you very correctly mentioning that in manufacturing also. So a lot of the focus which is happening is, one, on focusing on rather than having a plain degree, so that there is more employment. And one of the areas that we are working on is how to improve the female employment rates, because that is one area that we need to do a lot more, and that is where a lot of the productivity gains of the future will come about. So while I'll not so much focus on the changes that we are doing on the digital part, a lot more focus is also to ensure that the working conditions are more amenable and easier. And that's why, for example, you had the focus this time on larger number of working women hostels, larger number of creches being there at all levels. So I think along with the digitalization is also to how to improve the female labor working ratio. And that's going to be a focus as we move ahead.
So we just have a minute left, and I think the question that somebody from the audience has sent is a good one to end on, saying skilling is a big agenda. The question to both panelists is your government prioritizing skilling to serve world demand for services or skilling to serve the domestic economy? I love this question. I don't know if someone, it sounds like I got someone to plant it, but it's a lovely one, because I think from India's ambition to be Vishwaguru and all, the stuff that we hear every time. But what do you think? Are we skilling to meet world demand or skilling to serve the domestic economy?
Yeah, so let me just mention two things in this regard. One is skilling for the world economy also means a lot of issues related to ensuring that skilled people can move to those countries. And that's why we've signed a number of mobility and migration agreements with a number of countries. And that focus would continue so that there is a facilitation for people to be able to move where the demand is. The second area that a lot of work is going on is the fact remains that as the global population ages, in the care economy, there will be a lot of requirements globally. And many of those requirements can be met from India. So the number of training focused on the care economy, and care I mean not only on the health side, it has plus on the entire spectrum. The number of people that we are training, which will be served not only domestically and globally, would be there. But obviously, for the domestic economy, we would be scaling. But I think we have the perspective that globally there would be requirement, and keeping in view the demographic profile that we have the opportunity to tap that market.
Dr. Rajan?
About 2-3 years ago, when we formed an economic advisory council, in the first meeting with them, my chief minister set out his vision. And that was that he wants to make Tamil Nadu the human resource capital of the world. To me, I don't think there's a great distinction today. We are in a global economy. In almost every product, in almost every service, even in a field like agriculture, in some way we are integrated to the global economy in price, in demand, in technology. We want to adopt the best. So Tamil Nadu, I believe, already today is a great source of human capital around the world, and it is our stated ambition to be the premier source of human capital for the global economy, black and white ambition. Yeah.
So I think we couldn't end on a more positive note. India is prepared for the world. India wants to be the human capital hub for the world, and we're open for business. Thank you very much. I hope I could answer some of your questions. Thank you.